Welcome back to Chapter by Chapter, where I review a book a chapter at a time to see where it fell apart. The following review will contain spoilers. At the end of the last chapter, Isla very politely ate a bite of human heart and spent the night vomiting blood. This led to a Google search that I'm sure will haunt my search history for a long time. The short version is, according to the Mayo Clinic, this single bite of heart has caused major liver failure, cancer, or the lining of her stomach or esophagus to slough off. Fun! Okay, it's not that, because magic. But it does seem a bit much for a single bite. Even food poisoning wouldn't cause you to vomit blood, and certainly not all night. How much blood can she lose before she just dies? Isla had been born without the wildling curse, or their powers. Since birth she had lived locked away, protected by Poppy and Tara, in fear that her realm would discover her secret. Somehow hiding her away in a greenhouse seems like it would draw more suspicion. Her mother was to blame. She broke the most important wildling rule. She fell in love, and then she failed to kill him. Is this a rule or a curse? I was under the impression that the curses forced them to kill those they loved. It's an important distinction. If one person can resist the curse for, assumably, 9 months, why can't they all? And what does that mean for the other curses? Could Oro just walk out in the daylight if he just believed hard enough? Can Cleo just will the ocean to behave? Isla's father had murdered her mother moments after Isla was born, and their spawn was powerless, her own curse, as a consequence of her mother somehow thwarting the first. Isla's malediction was not eating hearts or killing a beloved, but being a ruler born without power was just as deadly. Rulers were expected to inject their power into the land to keep their people strong. It was why Lightlark was so engorged with energy, and how the realms had survived in the new lands they had formed after they'd fled the island. Without power to give, her realm was steadily dying. So far, her people had blamed their curses and the length of time away from Lightlark for the deaths, but some were starting to become suspicious of Isla. And how do you know that? From Poppy and Tara? I wouldn't think they're a super reliable source, since their best plan was to lock her in a greenhouse, of all things. Maybe she heard while adventuring with the Starstick? If injecting power into the land is important to the realm's survival, shouldn't she have abdicated the throne if she's so worried about her people? That she's not working on feeding? Even if she's going to do the bloodline thing, Isla's going to have cousins. Unless every ruler of the wildling has exactly one child, which makes her family tree a straight line. It seems like a disaster waiting to happen, which is fine from a story perspective. Fantasy is no stranger to one true king tropes. But it doesn't say that in this case. Which brings up the question of how her imprisonment even worked. The queen is dead.
Boo!
Her daughter lived.
Yay!
But there has to be a regent of some sort, some form of government, and the literal baby could take the throne. In the meantime, she's going to need schooling. Not just reading and writing, but history, economics, politics. All the things she's going to have to know to run a country with a major food problem. Then one day, the swordmaster and the etiquette teacher hide her away and let no one else see her? And no one thought, maybe this is a coup and an attempt to make the child they're keeping undereducated a puppet for their own benefit. And who is running things? Surely Poppy isn't dictating trade agreements to Congress or whatever, and being taken seriously. There are so many reasons the greenhouse is stupid just on the face, and it gets worse the more you think about it. I get you want your protagonist to have issues they need to overcome, but if you're going to do something weird, you need to explain it. Dropping it casually into the narrative and hoping no one notices isn't going to work. An evil regent who doesn't want to give up power to the rightful ruler is a classic because it's very obvious why someone would want to cling to power. The fact that it is the swordmaster and the etiquette teacher is what makes it weird. There is no obvious benefit to the two of them for taking her hostage, and a lot of people who would benefit from freeing her. Anyway, she goes on to expositioning about the prophecy, and drops that if a ruler dies without an heir, all their people die along with them. These are good stakes, but also a good reason for all these people to work together. She talks about how the first centennial was a bloodbath and all the rulers tried to kill each other but failed, and so rules were set. Honestly, I desperately want to see this first centennial. Oro stood on the steps in front of his golden throne instead of on it. That was the first thing Isla noticed as she entered the grand hall. Does Oro, or any of them really, regularly stand on thrones? If so, why? It was noteworthy, at least. Or maybe her editor needed to pay better attention. Leaders seemed to be constantly reminding people around them of their authority. During the few times she had visited the Moonling Newlands, she had seen countless ice statues carved in the likeness of their ruler, heard Moonlings speak about paying their monthly dues, and saw patrols Cleo kept constantly roaming the streets. I feel like Aster is trying to paint Cleo as a tyrant here. But she also just told us the lives of each realm are 100% dependent on the ruler who, as far as I can tell, is basically immortal unless killed. That's a recipe for a tyrant. Or a doormat of a leader. But none of these things, on their own, indicate Cleo is a bad leader. People may love her and choose to make statues of her. Taxes could go towards only necessary public works like roads and schools, and towering seawalls to thwart the curse. Patrols could be to keep kids away from the water. Kind of weird that is what she took from her visits, because God knows when I meet a strange girl who is likely dressed outside the cultural norm, I start chatting about taxes, and not literally anything else. Also, policing is a very nuanced conversation. Speaking as an American, our system of policing is terribly broken and in desperate need of reform to move it away from cops who behave like an occupying force that acts with impunity. That's not the same thing as saying we don't need police. The mere fact that Cleo has patrols on her streets does not automatically make them bad. Not that our greenhouse prisoner would know anything about the basic functioning of a country. The next thing she noticed that were 6 chandeliers of fire overlapping across the ceiling. Are the chandeliers made of fire? How does that work? How are they overlapped? Where was the editor on this book? They echoed the flames in the 4 hearths burning brightly. She thought back to her attendant's comment. The king never wanted any of the fireplaces to go out. Why not? That's going to be warm. Also, I hope those are run by magic, because after 500 years, you are going to be running low on trees. And then what? Maybe Oro has the wildlings growing trees for him in exchange for hearts. Anyway, they gather up, and Isla is hungry because she can't eat hearts, and apparently they aren't feeding her anything else. And despite being a queen, she felt she needed to steal from the kitchen instead of just asking for a snack. Does that mean the wildlings can only eat hearts and nothing else? How did Tara and Poppy feed Isla without anyone noticing? And we're back to how many hearts are they going to try and feed her? Also, she spent all night vomiting blood. Hungry doesn't come to mind. I suddenly feel sorry for whoever's cleaning her room. Some of the rulers who still have people present on Lightlark visit their sub-islands where they are viewed almost like gods. Isla wonders what the sub-islands are like and wishes she could use the star stick to teleport to Celeste's room so she could ask. Why she can't use the star stick to just go look for herself is unclear. And we finally get the rules of the game. The first rule. A ruler may not assassinate or attempt to assassinate another ruler until the 15th day. And when pairs are decided on the 25th day, a ruler may not assassinate their partner. After the chaos of the first centennial, the 100 days had become more structured, split into parts. The first 25 days were dedicated to demonstrations hosted by each ruler, designed to test one another's strengths and worthiness of staying alive. Oro. Oro is the strongest. She announced it back on Chapter 2, page 13. He, the Sunling ruler and king of Lightlark, the last remaining origin, with blood from each of the 4 realms that still held a presence on the island. He could wield each of Lightlark's powers. Even knowing there is no way the special sunflower is powerless as she claims, Oro's still wielding 4 powers to everyone else's 1. There is no way for him to lose this. Everyone has to know this. Even if it weren't painfully obvious, this is the 5th time they have done this. Of the 6 rulers, 3 have done this all before. Only Grimm, who has refused to participate, Celeste, and Isla are new. What can they possibly show at this point that they haven't before? And to what end? The newbies aren't going to have the raw power of Oro, or the years of experience of those who are centuries older than them. And worthiness to live is so weird to say. Set aside for a moment that everyone should have the inalienable right to life, and take what we know at face value. If they want to end the curse, a ruler has to die. The people of each realm depend on the ruler giving power to the land so it will thrive. A ruler must have an heir to pass that power to, so that point 2 can continue, or all the people in the realm die. So what they're really saying is, which realm are we going to kill off based on how well their leader does tricks? How are these even going to be judged, and by who? In the Hunger Games, there were demonstrations too, but those were for the rich people placing bets, not to impress each other. God, I can't believe I'm only on page 30. How many pages are there? 409. Fuck. Anyway, the winner gets to decide the pairings. So, Oro. Is he just fucking with them for his own amusement? The second rule. All rulers must attend and participate every centennial event. That rule seemed innocuous, but was dangerous, depending on what it was. I really hope Aster follows through on these implied dangers and deadliness. The third rule. To participate, no ruler can have an heir, so their death would successfully eliminate the familiar line and break the curses. According to the prophecy, it would mean the end of their realm forever. So we are changing the rules. It isn't that a ruler has to die, it's that a realm has to die. What if it's Oro? Does he just take all of Lightlark with him and the 4 sub-realms still attached to them? I can see why Grimm has just basically said fuck you all and stayed home. And it feels like the best way to get out of all of this is just to have a kid. What's stopping any of them? Unless children can only be born out of love in this society, you can just go have a kid with someone. No need to love them and share powers or whatever. Or hell, maybe hook up with another ruler or 3, form a polycule and outclass Oro. There is literally no benefit for any of you to follow these rules. This plot only works if you are all idiots. Each ruler received an invitation to the centennial containing these rules. Acceptance of it meant acceptance of the 3 ordinances. Did she just pull a fucking as-you-know trope? This should have been in Chapter 1. They all have to agree to these rules and seal them with blood. For some reason, Isla must cut her hand on her crown deep enough to freely bleed, without flinching. No reason why, but Poppy made her practice by cutting her over and over again. Poppy is clearly a sadist. Each of the ruler's blood has special properties. Isla's is supposed to bloom flowers, but because she is powerless, she has to fake it with sleight of hand. I'm somewhat amused she resorts to street tricks. However, it really isn't necessary to exposition on this. Just have it happen. Show, don't tell. Now they've all made their vow that if they break the rules, they forfeit the prize of unmatched power, except Oro. He's bound with his life because he's the host. Was that why Oro had saved her? Did he have responsibilities too? It was unclear how accidental deaths factored into the prophecy. What was clear is that the King of Lightlark had a plan, and it apparently involved Isla staying alive, at least until he wanted her dead. That's a lot of assuming you're doing on a very little evidence, Miss Island Crown. Sure, Oro, and everyone else for that matter, has a plan. But there's no reason to think it has anything to do with Isla. As she said, the prophecy is unclear about accidental deaths. He may just have saved her to be safe. It's not like he did more than pull her dumb ass out of the ocean and drop her unconscious body on a balcony. For all she knows, he just has to make sure she is on Lightlark when she dies, and the ocean may have been technically out of bounds. Once again, I really hope we get this prophecy, and not just some vague thing that can mean whatever the story needs, whenever it needs it. But that ends this chapter. Yes, that was the whole chapter. 5 pages in which the only real movement of the plot is Isla walking into a room, listening to rules she already knows, and seals it with blood and fire. Most of it is Isla expositioning to the reader. This reads like a first draft, something that desperately needs an editor to smooth it out and make it less of an exposition dump. We are 4 chapters in, and Isla is still telling us how the world works. I cannot express this enough. Show, don't tell. It would have been so much better if we'd learned about Isla's lack of powers when she does her sleight of hand. Imagine she's standing watching the other rulers doing involuntary blood magic, and we have to witness her fear as she releases the flower with her blood. Did anyone notice? Have to remain calm. Don't panic, act normal. Don't look around or act suspicious. Instead, it reads like a recipe. It's just so goddamn clinical. Cleo's blood hardened into ice before being seared by the fire. Grimm's blood became dark as ink. Azul's blood suspended in the air, separating into parts before finally falling. Celeste's blood burst into a mess of sparks. Oro's blood burned brightly before even reaching the flames. It reminds me of when she talked about the sub-islands. It's just a list. Here's how I would write it. Isla bent Celeste's eyes through the flames. They talked about this. The timing had to be perfect. Cleo lifted her hand and squeezed. Blood slid from between her fingers, turning to ice as it rushed to the consuming flames. The others followed suit. In her peripheral, she saw Grimm's blood darken, and Azul's float on unfelt wind. But she watched Celeste and Oro through her lashes. As the sunling blood flared with its own flame, and the starling's blood exploded like sparklers, she subtly released the flower hidden in her hand, letting the blood-red petals float into the fire. Heart-hammering, she glanced around without turning her head. Had anyone noticed the small sleight of hand? See the difference? This is Aster's main problem. Isla is playing a detached narrator instead of being part of the story. Please join me next time to see if I can escape exposition hell. Thank you for your time. I know everyone's mileage will vary, so feel free to leave your thoughts.